Hello and welcome to Swiftly Spoken, a fan-made Taylor Swift podcast in which we analyse her artistry, including her lyricism, music videos, and full album retrospectives. As always, we are your hosts Cameron and Lisa, and in this episode we're going to be talking about Taylor's track fives, ranking them, and then discussing if they deserve their track five status. Okay, so in this episode, we're going to start off by discussing what a track five is in the Taylor Swift fandom, and then go through each of the track fives on each album. So, just saying what the track is, Taylor's explanation, and if we think other songs deserve to be placed as track five, and then we'll be finishing off by giving our official track five rankings.
For anyone wondering what exactly a track five is or what that means within the Taylor Swift fandom, according to Taylor, track fives basically involuntarily or unintentionally became the most vulnerable tracks on each album. So the placement at first was very coincidental, but later on down the line, after fans kind of noticed this pattern, Taylor began to place track fives intentionally. And now they have become very iconic within the fandom. Whenever a new album is released, track five usually is the most personal or most vulnerable, according to Taylor. Not necessarily the saddest on the album, but something that really strikes a chord to Taylor's personal storytelling and vulnerability. Speaking about track fives, when she introduced The Archer on a Lover live stream, she said that she didn't realize that she was doing it, but while she was making albums, she was kind of putting very vulnerable, personal, honest, emotional songs as the track number five. So, because she noticed that, and because fans noticed it, she started to put the songs that were really honest, emotional, vulnerable, and personal purposefully as track five. And thus, it became kind of like a tradition within the fandom. So it seems that previous to Lover, she kind of was doing this accidentally because in the Reputation Secret sessions, apparently she mentioned something along the lines of, oops, I did it again. The most vulnerable song is track five. And then from Lover onwards, she intentionally placed them because, like I just mentioned, she was well aware of what was going on.
Yeah, I think that this was something that was accidental, and I think once we get into it and properly discuss some of these songs, we will maybe realize that this is not intentional from day one. However, I do feel like from reputation there was an awareness, but not maybe an intentional I am going to place this specifically, but it is a bit like oops, I've realized that I've done this again. And then
Yeah.
from Lover, like you said, it was like this is intentional, Folklore intentional, Evermore intentional. So yeah, it's interesting that it became a tradition without her even realizing that she was doing it, and then it became something that was purposeful. Okay, so now we're going to go through each album chronologically and discuss each of the track five, what the track five is, whether we think it deserves its track five status, and if not, what tracks then do possibly deserve track five more than the actual official track five. Okay, so starting off with debut, we have Cold As You. So what do you think about Cold As You? Do you think this is the perfect track five for debut?
I think it set the bar very, very high. I've talked about Cold As You previously because I absolutely love the song. I think the lyricism is top tier, especially considering this is a debut album.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think it has amazing lyrics. It's a very vulnerable song. It fits. It's emotional, vulnerable, personal. In my opinion, it's the one that fits the most off of debut. I know other people speak about other songs being, close to it. Maybe you have some options, but for me,
Yeah.
I have in my head, I've always thought that this was a very, very good track five, especially being the first one ever.
Yeah.
It kind of sets the tone perfectly.
Me
In my
too.
opinion.
I've also said that this is kind of the perfect track five. I think that it works perfectly. There's not another one on debut that I would place on it. However, there are other possible contenders that
Right.
if there was a debate about changing it, these would be the other two that I would maybe consider. So Tied Together with a Smile
Yeah.
is one that I would consider, and maybe Invisible.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
those two I think could work, but Cold As You works perfectly and is, like you said, perfect. It's a real standout on debut lyrically. So I think that, and that's also something that is something that kind of follows across some of the track fives, is that lyrically they're quite impressive as well. So I think that
For
Cold As
sure.
You definitely sets the bar really high. But yeah, I think Invisible and Tied Together with a Smile could work if they were put there originally, but Cold As You works perfectly.
Yep, I completely agree. I think I was thinking of Tied Together with a Smile if I had to change anything, but I couldn't change it because I do think like you said, Cold as You lyrically is absolutely amazing. And again, for a debut album to have such a lyrically standout song,
Yeah.
it's really, really
It's
good.
definitely like top of debut for me. Definitely Cold as You. I think it's
For me as well. Yeah.
really heartbreaking as well. I think that it really, really works in that track 5 kind of world.
I stood there loving you and wished them all away. Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
amazing.
That's what I mean. The metaphors in it and stuff are just really good and are something that, yeah, like you said, it sets the bar really high. And I think that it's kind of forgotten about a bit because it's kind of trumped by other track 5s, which are stellar, that we'll go on to talk about. That Cold as You,
Yeah,
because it was the first. You know,
right.
it's kind of the baby of the track 5s that it kind of gets left behind and outshadowed by, you know, the All Too Wells and the Dear Johns of this world. That it
Right.
kind of gets
But
forgotten
it
about.
definitely, yeah, it sets a nice tone.
Next is Fearless, and Fearless's track 5 is White Horse. So how do you feel about White Horse as a track 5?
So again, I think White Horse fits as a track 5 on its respective album. Fearless has other good contenders, and I think it works as a track 5 because, in my opinion, it breaks with the theme that is working on Fearless. So on Fearless, we have this very romantic fairy tale ending songs,
Yeah.
especially with Love Story being placed just a couple of songs before it.
Mm.
And then we have this complete break where Taylor is basically breaking down and saying, like, you know, you're not a prince, I'm not a
Yes.
princess, this is
Yeah.
not working. And I think it's very, very vulnerable in the fact that she admits, like, I've been stupid, stupid girl, I should have known.
Yeah.
And that is quite a heavy thing to admit. Like, she's facing a relationship and being like, no, this is, I was stupid to have seen so much in you that you can't, you know,
Yeah,
it could never be.
and that's a very kind of vulnerable personal thing to do, to turn around to
For
yourself and be like,
sure.
this is me, that's kind of, I'm the idiot here because I thought that this could be
Mm,
something that, you know, some idealized romantic, when it's not, it's quite the opposite. And I agree, I think that it's a perfect, and like you said, there are other contenders, but White Horse I think works really well. What were some of the other contenders of yours that you were thinking maybe?
So for me, another one that I put up there was "Forever and Always" piano version, which I
Yes,
know isn't
yes.
is not really a Fearless song originally,
Mm,
but we do have it on Fearless. So I was thinking, obviously, you can't put the original "Forever and Always," I
no,
don't think, because there's
no.
just a little bit too much amp to it. But
Yeah.
the piano
But then
version could work. Yeah.
once we get on to 1989 and we
Oh,
discuss
yeah.
this,
We'll get
the track
there.
5 of 1989,
Yeah.
technically Forever and Always could work really,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
suppose the lyrics work. Like you said, the fact that when it's given a piano version, it definitely works. But yeah, that's funny
Yeah.
that I also, because in my notes I wrote like, I know this is a platinum edition, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think if we were going to pick, then that would, if Forever and Always was put on Fearless with its piano version originally, then that I definitely think that could maybe outwork, maybe even, I don't know whether it would deserve it more than White Horse, because there is a real kind of heartbroken like vulnerability to Forever and
Yeah.
Always. Um,
I think
so
it's
yeah,
just as vulnerable and personal in the sense that it speaks about very personal, you know, situations in Taylor's life
yeah,
and very emotional as well. However, I think that White Horse is just a little bit more tragic, whereas Forever and Always is left pretty much unresolved.
yeah,
White Horse reminds me a lot of the song that comes in the next album as a track 5, Dear John, because both of them have like this same moment in which they're like, no, I'm gonna find someone else, I'm gonna, you know, I'm shining over your empty town, I'm
yeah,
leaving the empty town in the rear view mirror. So both of
yes,
them are very similar to me in that sense, whereas in Fearless I think this one fits because, like I said, it breaks with this thematical thing that she's got going on. For Speak Now I think differently,
yes.
but I guess we'll
We
get
will
to that
get
now.
onto that. Have you got
Yes.
any other contenders for track 5?
We could go with something like Breathe. But for me, those were the two I had
Mm,
in mind. I went with Forever and Always as a backup, but to be honest with you, I do think White Horse
mm.
fits. So that's how I left. But
I
I feel
hadn't.
like you've got something else in mind.
Yeah, I have got something else, but I haven't got Breathe actually. And to be fair,
Okay.
I think it could work. But yeah, for me, Breathe didn't stand out. I have You're Not Sorry
Oh
as
my God,
maybe
yeah.
another contender. I
That's
think
a
that
pretty
could
good
work
one,
quite
yeah.
well because that's quite, you know, this kind of heartbroken element. I don't think that it's, like I said, as deserving as White Horse, but I was just trying to think of other contenders, and I think yeah, You're Not Sorry could really work quite well. especially the way that it was kind of put with like Back to December on the Speak Now tour. I know that's obviously a different kind of totally
Mm.
different. It's a different era and stuff, but it's something that its kind of themes and stuff I think could work quite well really with a track 5. But no, White Horse really is the standout. But yeah, Breathe, I'd not thought about that, but that also could work quite well. Again, that kind of that but yeah, like you said, the White Horse's themes work well because it is that kind of real like vulnerability and personal element of, you know, the fact that it's like, yeah, I should have known. Okay, so next is Speak Now, and Speak Now's track 5 is Dear John. And as we had kind of hinted, I think both of us are quite similar here, that we feel as much as Dear John is an amazing track, and I think
Yeah.
works as a track 5, there is a song on that album that I think
Works better.
thematically, sound-wise, just works better. And what do you think that track is then?
Oh yeah, I think we both know we're talking about Last Kiss.
Yeah, Last Kiss. Last
Yeah.
Kiss was robbed of track 5 status. I
It
really think it was
was.
robbed of it.
It was robbed of track 5 status. Now, this isn't to say that Dear John doesn't deserve it as well, because Dear John is an amazing song. It's very vulnerable. It's very honest, out there. It's one of her bravest songs. Obviously,
Oh, definitely.
you know, to be on Speak Now, the album, it's got to be a brave song anyway, because of just that
The
album
themes,
is how it is. Yeah. But, and as vulnerable as that is, and that, you know, silver lining that it has to the end of it, Last Kiss is just so much more tragic.
Oh, the breath of
Oh,
like
the shaky breath.
yeah,
That deserves it.
the
Just that
broken,
also.
yeah, and the lyrics, and you know, the idea of it's and I've always loved the fact of Last Kiss. I'm not sure if I've said this in a previous episode, but when she says like when the last time she says kiss, you didn't realize it was the last time she was going to say it.
Yeah.
And it's like when
She
she
leaves
ends
it.
with last and never says kiss, and you're like, oh, and you're thinking like, why didn't you say kiss? And then it's like, just like her not realizing that the last kiss was going to be her last kiss.
Yeah.
The last time she said kiss, you didn't realize it
That
was like,
27-second intro.
yeah, it's just, I love it. And I love Last Kiss so much. And I've always felt there's another track when we get further on into the albums that I've always just thought was the track 5.
Okay.
And forget that it isn't. And Last Kiss is one of those where I just think, oh yeah, that's the track 5. And it isn't. And like I said, as much as Dear John is a stellar track, incredible bridge, probably one of my favourites off of Speak Now, there's something about Last Kiss that vulnerability and personalness of it, I don't know if that's a word, but it just works so well. And that's one of the reasons why you could tell that this was accidental, the track 5 thing, because I think if it was on purpose,
she might have put them the other way around.
I think that Last Kiss might have taken its place. I really do think that it would have taken the place.
And it's funny because both Dear John and Last Kiss have not been performed very often live, because they're songs that both resonate with Taylor so much, and they from such vulnerable and personal roots to them, that she hasn't performed them live very often. Last Kiss we haven't got, I think, since the Red tour. Dear John perhaps even before, I can't remember right now, but it would be interesting to find out, if we ever could, how she managed to re-record them when that time comes.
You know, one thing that I've always been worried about with Last Kiss is that Taylor, that kind of vulnerable brokenness and the breathy vocals might not be recreated. Yeah, whether she can emulate that. And to be fair, the vulnerability and stuff on Folklore, I think if she can grasp that like she did for Sad, Beautiful, Tragic, I think that it will sound incredible. But for me personally, I felt like Breathe didn't, and White Horse, Taylor's version, didn't have the same emotion that the originals had, because obviously Taylor doesn't feel that anymore, because you know that she's it's years and years later. So I'm hoping that she'll be able to kind of capture that sound for Last Kiss, because I would be so sad if we don't get that kind of like
shaky
brokenness. Yeah, because that really kind of makes you think, oh no. And that's one of the things that I feel like it gives it is track 5. It deserves track 5. So the next album is Red, and obviously the track 5 of Red is All Too Well. And I don't think there's really any debate here. This is like the ultimate track 5, and it's probably one of the songs that made people realise that track 5 was a thing.
Mm-hmm. And this is the track 5.
Especially when you then think about the 10-minute version of All Too Well. Obviously, it's not technically the track 5, but as Taylor has said, that is the version of All Too Well, so I kind of take it now as the version. So yeah, this is the one, really. Other contenders? Do you think there is other contenders on Red maybe that could?
I think and also taking into account the vault that we now have, I
Mm,
think maybe Better Man, I
yeah,
think maybe I Almost Do.
yeah, and also the
But
fact that she said that there was a debate between whether it was All Too Well or Better Man.
yeah,
So yeah, definitely, I think Better Man. If All Too Well
but
hadn't
I
made it,
really, maybe, yeah, but I really just can't see it any other way,
no,
especially because All Too Well is always going to be known as the track five, like it
yeah.
is the one, just because of how the fandom have treated it, and now we have this 10-minute version. So
Mm.
if ever there was a track five, it is All Too Well.
Too well, yeah. Other contenders for me, maybe Sad,
Hmm.
Beautiful, Tragic. Like you said, Better Man, I Almost Do. There's some ones that I could debate, but I just couldn't ever see them on there. Like,
Honestly, I just don't think that any of them are able to reach the level of lyricism and the level of like vulnerability and the level of how tragic the song is.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
Taylor described it once as following a relationship to its bitter end, and it
Yeah,
honestly is. It really, really is. And I guess the only thing that we would change is now we would consider the 10-minute version as the standard,
yeah.
at least in my opinion.
Oh, definitely, yeah. That's like I said, that's what I take now as the standard. I have a playlist for Red Taylor's version, and my All Too Well is the 10-minute version. I don't really listen to the 5-minute version because the other day when I shuffled Taylor songs on my phone, I was like, oh, this sounds weird. And I was like, oh, I
It's
was like,
the
this is the
5-minute
like
version.
the
Yeah.
5-minute version of All Too Well. I was like, what? I was slightly confused. I was like, what's going on? Because I literally haven't listened to it since release day because the 10-minute, when I listen to it, I'm like, it's missing that bridge or that element or that lyric because it just feels like it's missing something. So I take the 10-minute version now as the standard version of All Too Well. So yeah, that is when you take that into account as well. Like the standard version of All Too Well is deserves track 5 anyway, but the 10-minute version is like on another level. The next album is 1989 with a slightly controversial track 5, which is All You Had to Do Was Stay. So how do you feel about this as track 5? I know that there's a lot of debate online about this track.
Yeah, as we exit the country albums and we enter into the pop ones, track fives are really going to change up from now on. And also, it's funny because none of them are actually in the same, they're not heartbreaking in the sense that we're listening to a relationship breaking down. They're
Yes.
much more exploratory and diverse, as we're going to see. 1989's one is very difficult because 1989 itself is not a tragic album. It does have a lot of tragedy to it, but that's kind of lost in its production.
Mm,
When you hear stripped back versions of many of these songs, you kind of see it as what it is. Obviously, all you had to do was stay suffers from being a sad bop, so it's
yeah.
sad and it's vulnerable, but it's kind of murky and in a way you can't see it because of its production.
Yeah.
However, I don't think it's the most vulnerable. I don't think it's the
No.
most personal. I don't think it's the most emotional. I do think it
No.
has tinges of those things, but even Taylor herself, when she discusses this song, I think she discussed it when she was talking about Ryan Adams' cover of
Yeah.
All You Had to Do Was Stay, and she said, yours is so much more tragic, whereas mine is like, well, all you had to do was stay. Sorry,
Yeah.
you missed out. And I
Yeah.
think that, like, that as a track five,
Mm.
I don't
That's the
know, it
thing.
just doesn't fit for me.
I think if it was given the piano treatment of Forever and Always, it you then see the tragedy in the lyrics. But yeah, the
Right.
way that it's sung and the production that it's given doesn't give it that vibe. And I think that it works. Like it does work, and I do like
It
it. I
does.
like it.
You can
I like
fit
it
it
as a
into the
song
track
anyway.
fives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing is I generally just really like it as a song, so I kind of then try not to disregard it. But I think that it's hard on 1989 to pick one, and like we've said before,
Definitely.
1989 is kind of a breakup album hidden with a kind of this idea of kind of new hope and new life and
Mm,
new girl in a big city kind of vibe. So
yeah.
it's hard to pick one, but like you, I guess that you've kind of suggested that you had some other contenders. So what were they? I'm intrigued
Yeah.
because I've also
So,
got one that I think
okay,
could
I
take it.
have two. One is Out of the Woods.
Really, I
Uh,
really.
because I know this is a very weird one to mention
Mm,
here, because again, Out of the Woods suffers from being a sad bop, but it is also very hopeful. But
mm,
I do think it's very personal. I think it's very vulnerable in the sense that
yeah,
you're laying out all your cards like, are we ever going to be out of this situation? Like the
yeah.
nervousness, the anxiety in it. And it's very personal, obviously. We get all of these little details. I think it's one of the most personal songs on
Oh,
1989.
definitely, yeah.
So that's why I thought that one. And another one, which I don't know if we maybe coincided in this one, is This Love. which is
Oh, really? Oh, no, that's not the one I picked.
random at the moment.
Mm,
But I think it's because maybe I have Taylor's version on repeat, so that's
yeah.
entered into my subconscious. But I think it's also quite a personal song, and I also think it's quite vulnerable to, again, laying out the cards on the table like, it's good, it's bad, you
Mm,
left, and now you're back. I
yeah.
don't know if it would deserve track 5 status, but again, 1989 is such a difficult
Different.
album.
Yeah. The one that
So
I
what have you
picked,
got?
the one that I
Mm.
picked was Wildest Dreams.
Okay,
Like,
interesting.
Say You'll
Yes,
Remember Me, like,
the
even,
Grammy
yeah, like,
version,
yeah,
the
definitely.
Grammy museum
Oh,
version.
definitely. Oh, that
That
one,
would work.
definitely. But yeah, this, yeah, that kind of idea of like, yeah, like please remember me, like please. So that's kind of why I chose it. But to be fair,
Okay,
thinking about it, Out of the Woods actually could deserve it. I think probably more than All You Had to Do is Stay. Actually, there is more of a
again,
vulnerability there.
the Grammy museum
Oh,
version
especially
on
that piano.
piano,
Oh,
Out of
yeah,
the Woods. Now
yeah.
that is tragic.
Straight up could fit. And I think, like we said, with Dear John and also All You Had to Do Was Stay, these kind of show that the track 5, like we said, was coincidental,
Yeah.
and wasn't on purpose. And yeah, and these two, because they're kind of, especially All You Had to Do Was Stay, I know there's a lot of debate about that. Like, this isn't a track 5, that doesn't deserve it, this is a happy song.
Is
And
the
there's
most
all,
debated one for sure.
definitely, and there's been a lot of people then trying to put it with a piano behind it to be like, no, look, it is sad, I promise. If you
Yeah.
just, to put the tempo down. And I think it is. But I think, like you said, I think you argue the case well for All Too Well, and I would, not All Too Well, sorry, Out of the Woods. And I think that, yeah, it would, I think personally I would probably change it if I was to change up the track list, probably give Out of the Woods its place. Yeah, I think it just mimics like the All Too Well, even kind of the Dear John and White Horse kind of vibes, I think that it describes your relationship, quite well, really, whereas All You Had to Do Was Stay doesn't really describe much. It's just like you should have
Right.
stayed.
That's true, actually. If you look at the ones we've previously discussed, all of them are describing either a breakdown or a specific moment or a
Mm,
specific portrait of a relationship. And I think Out of the Woods does that, whereas, like you said, All You Had to Do Was Stay is kind of a different moment, but
mm.
not really like a portrait, not a tableau of what was going on at that point. That's a very interesting point. That is actually very interesting to consider as well.
Yeah, and I suppose moving on to the next album. So this
Yes.
is one of the first that I would say is where there's more of a conscious choice, and this is obviously Reputation and is Delicate. So how do you feel about Delicate's
Yeah.
status of
So
track 5?
yeah, here, like we've said, things are going to shift now because obviously Taylor isn't in tragic breakup situations. However, that doesn't mean that she can't produce vulnerable or personal songs that fit for track 5.
Mm,
I personally think Delicate fits perfectly.
me too.
I don't think there could be another track 5. I don't know if you have options. I don't, because for me, this is the track 5 on an album such like Reputation. I can only think of one thing that maybe you're going to mention. We'll see
Mm,
now. But in my opinion, the way that Reputation works, the story that it's telling, I think Delicate, and considering her headspace,
yeah,
I do think, and now talking about that, the portrait that it paints of a certain relationship at a certain point of time in her life, I think Delicate does a very, very amazing
me too.
job.
Yeah, I think that if it was on another album, a Taylor Swift album, it probably wouldn't deserve track 5
Oh,
status.
no way, no way.
But I think in the
In its
Reputation,
context.
yeah, Reputation kind of album, it definitely is the most vulnerable, most personal. It kind of ticks all the boxes. But like I said, yeah, if it was put on, say, even 1989 maybe, or Red or something like that, or Lover, it probably wouldn't end up with that status. But no, Reputation, I think it works really well. There is one song that, yeah, I thought about, even though I think Delicate is perfect, is maybe Call It What You Want. That's the
Yes, yes, that's what
only
I had
other
in mind.
song, and that's only because it has a slight sadness to it, but it's not. It's positive of like, look, call this what you want. I don't care. I'm in a good relationship. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really fit the track 5 vibe, but none of the other songs really do at all. And imagine like putting like Ready for It. There's not really anything.
Yeah.
Reputation has a very distinct sound and
I have
distinct
had
themes.
people speak about Dancing with Our Hands Tied as a
I
track 5,
suppose, I don't know.
but again, it's
Mm,
kind of a different kind of situation. It is a vulnerable moment, especially when you get the backstory of her kind of breaking down while she was recording it and thinking of
yeah,
like, who's gonna handle this? But I think Delicate does have those feelings to it. It does have
me
that,
too. And that vulnerability
listen,
of like,
I'm
is
in
it cool that I said that? Is it too
exactly
soon to
like
do
the
this? Yeah.
anxiety that I'm in one of my worst moments and I'm
Mm,
saying things that I don't think I can say because, like, right now, who wants to handle all this?
yeah.
Delicate does have that theme to it, so I think it works perfectly.
Me
I
too.
honestly
I,
do.
I think it does, and like you said, it's a real switch up from the previous ones, like we've mentioned with, All
Yep.
Too Well, Dear John, White Horse. That kind of detail a certain kind of story of kind of a breakdown of a relationship, and even kind of Cold as You. Really, this is the first one that is, yeah, a real switch up of the track fives and kind of sets a new tone for track fives, and I think that's why then the next track, The Archer, kind of takes on a different
Mhm.
brand of track five. So yeah, we'll now move on to discuss obviously Lover and its track five, The Archer.
So when Taylor spoke about The Archer, she said that it was a very on-brand track five, meaning that, it was very personal, very vulnerable. However, it's from a different point of view. This is a point of view about more her anxieties, more focus on her and introspection, rather than a breakdown of a specific relationship or the anxieties in a specific relationship. Although it does discuss that too, it does kind of do a good job of speaking about herself in that moment and how she's dealing with relationships and how she sees the world around her. And again, it is a very anxious song, a very vulnerable one. But I don't know, I feel for me, it isn't the correct track five for Lover.
No, and I've always the thing is that I'm always like swayed by my opinion of the Archer in general. I'm
Right,
not the
I
Archer's
know.
biggest fan, as I'm sure
Yeah.
you know, and probably our listeners by now. And maybe that's why I don't personally think that it deserves track five status. I just
I have
don't.
a
There's
very
something.
difficult relationship
Yeah,
with The Archer
me
because it has
too.
such amazing lyrics and such amazing moments to it.
Mm,
Like, all of my enemies started out
friends.
friends,
Yeah, it's
but
that
help me
bridge.
hold on to you.
Yeah,
That's such a good lyric. It's such a
yeah.
vulnerable lyric. That one works, but then I get other parts of it where I'm just like, I disconnect.
Yeah, me too. And also, there's something about the production. Like, I know people always argue that it's about like tension and that it kind of builds,
Yes.
and then it
Yeah.
never really. It's like a bow, isn't it? And it
It's not
never really
resolved.
goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always wish that it would just go off. I just wish that
Right.
after the bridge it would just go because I don't know. I've always felt like, oh, where's this going? Where's this going? Oh, the end. I don't know. There's something about like I don't hate the song. I like it when I'm listening to Lover. I listen to it, sing along, but I never go out of my way to go. Oh, I really want to listen to The Archer. And like you said, there's really good lyrics in there. The Humpty Dumpty stuff. I
Yeah.
don't know. There's something about it that
Definitely.
I've just always been like, oh, I don't know if that's a great way of describing it. Like,
I know. It's like I don't know if it's the best lyric ever or just the worst. It's
yeah,
so difficult because it's like you get that and then you get the one that I mentioned straight afterwards, and it's like,
yeah,
God, I'm getting whiplash.
exactly. So what would you then say
Yeah.
deserves track five on Lover? Because
I
to be
think we
fair,
both know what
I
we're
think
gonna
we
say
both know.
here.
Yeah. What are
Yes.
you gonna say?
Cornelia Street.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Cornelia
I
Street.
think it's the one that, taking into account the metaverse of track fives and what we've
Mm,
discussed about them and how they are, I think Cornelia Street is just as vulnerable, just as personal,
yep.
just as emotional as any other track five. And I think it fits so well with Delicate before
I
it.
was just about to say that it is like kind of delicate, really, in terms of
Yeah.
the vulnerability of being like, and that's such a heartbreaking thing that if someone broke up with you, you would physically never be able to walk down a certain street because
No.
you would be so broken. You would never really be able to recover from the breakdown of that relationship that you physically couldn't ever
Yeah.
go somewhere where you were with that person. That's such
And
a kind of
again,
personal thing.
it paints such a beautiful portrait of that moment in time for her.
Yeah.
And I've always said this, All Too Well and Cornelia Street tell the same story but with very, very different endings.
Mm,
Like, they give us the beginning of a relationship, they give us the bumps in the road, they give us the moments of tension, and then
mm,
All Too Well goes completely awry, and Cornelia Street, they both choose to fight and stay,
yeah.
etc., etc. So it has very different outcomes, but I think the way it's written, the way that it's framed, the themes used in it are very, very similar, and that's why I've always thought there's a relation between them somehow. Like, there is a very tight relation in general between Lover and Red,
Just
which I think we've briefly discussed before.
Yeah, I also feel like Cornelia Street's it just sounds like a track five for me. Like, I don't know why, it has, like you said, that kind of association with All Too Well, association with Delicate, which are obviously two track fives. But even though Cornelia Street, I think, deserves track 5. It's technically not the saddest on Lover. You've got things like Soon You'll Get Better, which are also a
Right.
very personal and vulnerable song. And I suppose Death by a Thousand Cuts, its themes are quite sad and personal, but not really very personal to Taylor, because she wasn't necessarily feeling those. She was choosing to write from that perspective rather than writing about something that was,
Hmm.
very personal. So yeah, it's interesting that The Archer was chosen, especially because it was probably one of the first that was specifically chosen. I think Delicate was chosen, but maybe not overly intentional, but was kind of like, oh, yeah, that's quite vulnerable. That's a track 5. That's cool. That will stay there. But it was like
Yeah.
with The Lover, it's like, okay, when I'm creating this track list, I've got to think of what the track 5 is. I think that's one of the first where Taylor was really thinking about what the track 5 was. So it's interesting that that's the first one that we've, other than obviously Dear John, but this is the first one where we've both been like, no, you know?
That's funny, yeah. I think it's because if Lover was just alive and existed without all of the previous things that we've discussed, then we'd be like, yeah, this is a cool track 5 because it's the
Mm,
most vulnerable song, or it speaks of very, very vulnerable topics and a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry and a lot of personal struggles. However, with all of the previous lore to the track
mm,
5 Taylor in the Taylor Swift musical universe behind it, I think that's why it stands out. Like it kind of, that's why we have a problem with it because of
mm,
the precedent that she's already set previous to
mm.
it. I think that's why, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I would, for me, I just think Cornelia Street is the track 5. I forget that The Archer is track 5. I
Right.
just associate it with it. I don't know why. I just always have since day one. It's my kind of standout on Lover. So I don't know. I don't know. I think that yeah, that's the one that for me I would pick. But
Yep. I
it's
agree.
hard to like kind of place my finger on why I don't feel like The Archer deserves it, because it does. But then sometimes it feels like it doesn't. It's quite hard. Track 5, I think it's kind of been mythologized, the track 5, so
Oh,
much that it's
definitely.
really hard to pick. But
It
ironically,
must be very, very. There must be a lot of pressure for Taylor
pressure,
when it comes to picking a track 5 nowadays.
yeah. But ironically, even though I feel like The Archer was a slight misstep in terms of track 5, the next album, Folklore, it's
Yes.
track 5. This is insane. This is one of the best track 5s, which is obviously, like I
Right.
said, My Tears Ricochet for Folklore. So, what do you think about this one and what the kind of context behind it?
Yes. So again, it's a broader song in the fact that we don't look at a portrait of a relationship anymore, but at the same time we do, but it discusses a lot, and at the same time it discusses something very specific.
Mm,
So when Taylor described My Tears Ricochet, she says it's more of like an embittered tormentor visiting like the funeral of the person that they hurt the most, and she speaks about how the person that you've trusted is kind of betraying you, and she's comparing it to an end of a marriage and an end of a life in the song itself, and how someone that you trust so much can hurt you in the worst way. And I think that's what gives it its track 5 status.
oh,
i
definitely.
i think that there are a lot more personal songs that I'd previously realized on Folklore when I came to, you know, looking at other songs on this album, because Folklore is deemed as like, it's not about Taylor anymore.
Mm,
It's I thought about Mirrorball, This Is Me Trying,
yes.
Hoax,
Yeah.
Peace. All of them are vulnerable. All of them are very personal as well. But I think
Mm,
My Tears Ricochet fits the most because it is the most vulnerable and personal and emotional in terms of what she is was living and is living still
yeah.
at this
Yeah.
moment. I mean, we can basically relate it to Big
Big
Machine
Machine. Yeah.
and the loss of the masters, which is
Yeah.
something that is heavily discussed in Folklore and Ebony.
And how Taylor kind of always said that she viewed Scott Borchetta as family,
Yes.
and that it was such an ultimate betrayal because it was like being betrayed by, someone that was your family, someone that you trusted more than anyone, someone that you've, built your career with, and the amount of, stuff behind the scenes that she's gone through with him. And obviously some has been positive and negative, with obviously all the discussion with 1989 and the Big Machines kind of attitude initially towards that. But at the end of the day, that's the relationship that you have with friends and family. It's all up and down, but at the end of the day, there's some serious kind of connection there. So it would feel like the ultimate betrayal for someone that knows you probably better than most people, to sell something so personal of yours to someone that they know that that you despise,
Mm,
so it is the ultimate betrayal, and that's why My
betrayal.
Tears Ricochet is so kind of vulnerable and broken and personal, and especially the Folklore Long Pond session version is on another level. The way that Taylor sings that, and you can really hear the emotion in
Yeah,
that
and the
version.
pain. And
Yeah,
I think one lyric deems this song as the track five, and it's just unmovable in its in folklore, which is I could go anywhere I want, just not home.
yeah,
And the way
yeah,
she sings it, and the way there's so much emotion behind it, it makes it so personal. And we all know what she's speaking about, even though
yeah.
she's not speaking about it.
Exactly. Like I said, I remember when I heard it, I was like, "This is track 5." I was like, "Yes, yes, yes." I was like, "Oh, this is
Yeah,
so good." And yeah, they're like, "If I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake?" There's just
yeah,
this the metaphors in this are so like vivid, and just you can just imagine them so well. And I think she did an amazing job of comparing it, those metaphors, her situation with Big Machine, to the idea of someone that's hurt you so much, appearing at your kind of wake and talking negatively about you, and it's like, why are you here? That's
yeah.
the thing.
Why
It's
are you
like this.
still here?
Why are you still talking about me when you've killed me off anyway? So what's the
Yeah.
point? No, honestly, this is perfect. I haven't even got any contenders, and the ones that you raised, I definitely think,
Mm.
if Mightiest Ricochet didn't exist, could fit
Yeah,
perfectly.
that's
But
exactly what I was about to say. Those are there as other personal songs, and I thought it was interesting to mention because I didn't realize folklore was actually more personal than I believed it to be.
mm,
But at the same time, no, I completely agree with you. I think just like we said, All Too Well is unmovable. Just
yeah,
like we said, Delicate is unmovable.
cool.
In its context for folklore, My Tears Ricochet is also pretty much unmovable.
Cool. Okay, so going from a song that we are both very, very have very strong opinion that it deserves its place, I guess we're going to move into one that we are slightly more have a different opinion to, which is Evermore's "Tolerate It," which is Evermore's
Mm.
track 5.
Basically, she has classified Tolerate It as being part of the Unhappily Ever After anthology of marriages gone bad that is included on Evermore, that includes infidelity, ambivalence, toleration, and even murder in the case of No Body, No Crime.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's funny because Evermore for me is one of Taylor's most amazingly lyrical album,
Yep.
one of the most tragic, but as I always say, tragic, but ties up many, many knots really nicely, and it's laced with a lot of hope to it.
Yeah.
But she had so many choices,
Mm.
and yet she chose Tolerate It. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying anything bad about Tolerate It,
No, I
because it's a
love
good
"Tolerate
song,
It." I do love
but
it,
it's not track five
but it's
status.
just not when there's songs like, I don't know. I am a big lover of Champagne Problems, and I know that maybe it doesn't necessarily deserve track 5 in comparison to another song on um,
Hmm.
Evermore, but I'm still going to argue its status. That for me, I think that it deserves that. Champagne Problems is a different kind of vulnerability and brokenness, because it's your unlike all the other songs where uh, Taylor as the narrator is the one that's kind of been hurt and broken. In this case, she's the one doing it, which I think is still very personal and vulnerable.
Right.
So I think that that's why Champagne Problems could work. But realistically, the most vulnerable, broken, heartbreaking song on the album is Happiness. You
Yeah,
know,
that's one
it
that I've got.
yeah.
However, it's very difficult because Evermore, unlike folklore, I didn't find to be secretly personal. It does have its nuggets,
Mm,
and that's why I'm going to mention another song in just a moment.
yeah.
Um, but it does depart from a typical, except for like, in songs such as Long Story
So
Short,
short,
Marjorie, I don't think either of them could
or
be
it's time
deemed
to
as a
go.
track. Yeah,
No.
exactly. All of those are quite very, very personal, but not vulnerable, not
Yeah,
emotional in the
Marjorie kind of
sense.
fits in the
Yeah,
like never grow up, soon you'll get
yeah,
better, which are like really sad, but
exactly.
not
But they're
necessarily track
not.
5.
Exactly. Because again, track five doesn't just have to be sad according
Mm.
to kind of how we're viewing it,
Mm.
but something else. There's something else to it that
It's
really
like a
ties it.
personal vulnerableness
Yeah.
to them.
So it must have been hard for Evermore anyway, because on the one hand you have so many vulnerable songs, but on the other hand, they're kind of not that personal. Not
Mm.
the relation, the connection to them isn't the same.
Yeah,
However, that doesn't mean that they're not amazing songs. Tolerate It works really well because it is a sad song. Can you imagine
yeah,
being in such a situation?
yeah,
And I know that there are some people that are under the impression that Tolerate It could have been perhaps inspired by one of Taylor's past relationships.
yeah.
perhaps Calvin Harris. That's what
Yeah,
a lot of people
I have heard
I've
that.
read. Yes.
But then
So
Taylor's also mentioned that it was about kind of Rebecca.
exactly,
So
Daphne
yeah,
du Maurier.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that it's one of those things, isn't it, where, especially with a lot of the songs, she's gone back into different headspaces and sung from those headspaces. So there will be some
Right.
element that where she's taken some kind of, you know, personal
Yeah,
feelings.
and we can parallel it to All Too Well. You're so much
Mm,
older and wiser than
yeah.
I. And then obviously
Mm,
we have other contenders. Champagne Problems, you mentioned. Happiness. For me, Happiness is the most tragic. It is the
yeah.
most absolutely devastating, just how it's
Yeah.
framed, the way that it goes through certain parts,
The way
the
that it
way that it
details
has,
it as well is very
yeah,
similar to the previous ones.
exactly, the way that it does, again, paint that portrait of this very vivid relationship, the breakdown of it, and how it's so tragic because it's no one's fault. What do you do when a good man hurts you and you know that you hurt him too? Like,
Mm,
what can you do? Oh,
yeah.
I love Happiness. I could go on about it all day. But the option that I had, one that I feel is both personal and vulnerable, is
Mm,
Cowboy Like Me. I know it's
yeah.
framed in a very, very metaphorical and
Yeah.
storytelling way, but I feel like it is a personal song to Taylor and it
Cowboy Like Me
fits.
is my favourite on Evermore,
I know,
and I
yeah.
love it. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it could, but I think that I don't know. It look, for me, Happiness and Champagne Problems are like higher in the list of
Right.
deserving.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because that as much as there is vulnerableness, there's not that like broken vulnerableness of the other two, and even of Tolerate It. I think it's hard. Everyone's so hard because all of them have that, because they all, like, as Taylor said, they all deal with endings and, you know, relationship problems and marriage problems and infidelity, you know, like these,
Right.
you know, really heartbreaking problems. So it's hard to pick one out of, you know, an album that is full of so many things like that.
Yeah. I think she must have struggled as well.
I think so. But like I said, as much as Tolerate It does work, I do think that, Happiness for me and then for
Yeah.
you as well definitely
Yeah, yeah.
deserves that place. Okay, so now we're going to end the episode by ranking our all of the track fives from our favourite to least favourite. So, what is your rankings?
So I'll give my rankings, but before I just want to say that if I place something low or high, it doesn't mean that I don't like it or whatever. I've taken it as a track five, not as a song on its own,
Hmm.
not as, like a ranking, like how much I like its lyrics or its themes or whatever, just as a track five, how I would classify them. I'll go through them all. Number one, we have All Too Well.
Yep.
Then we have Cold as You, Dear John, My Tears Ricochet, Delicate, Tolerate It, White Horse, The Archer, All You Had to Do Was Stay.
Interesting. Very interesting. See, mine is it's actually quite different to yours, to be fair, but I've ranked it
Okay,
in a similar way where it's like whether it deserves.
the track
I've
five.
ranked it as a track five, but also my opinion has slipped in a little in terms of
Of
whether I
course,
love
of
the song.
course.
I've also ranked so All Too Well as number one, then
Mhm,
My Tears Ricochet, Dear John,
mhm.
Delicate, Cold as You, White Horse, All You Had to Do Is Stay, Tolerate It, and The Archer.
Okay, so
So yeah,
the top part is kind of similar in both
yeah,
of our cases. We have All Too Well. We have Dear John at number three.
yeah,
Cold as You and My Tears Ricochet, we've kind of flipped around.
yeah.
Delicate in the middle. And then our
Which is
bottoms really
interesting that
differ.
we've it's interesting that we've both put like Dear John quite high, considering both of us felt like Last Kiss deserved
Yes,
track five.
that's funny. But
Yeah.
I think when you look at the song itself, without
Mm,
comparing it to the rest of, that's where I kind of wanted to say I'm ranking it as it is a track five for its
yeah,
album and how it compares to the other track fives, and not thinking of other songs on the album that could have replaced it. You have in last place The Archer,
yeah. The Archer, yeah.
and then previous to that you have
Tolerate It.
okay, and
Mm,
then all you had to do was stay
yeah.
on top.
Whereas
Okay,
yours
that's
is
interesting.
your last one is All You Had to Do Is Stay.
Yes, I have. All you had to do was stay in last place. Before that, I have The Archer. And then
Okay.
before that, I have White Horse. And then before that, I have Tolerate It. But I guess them two could, I could be convinced to flip them,
Yeah.
I think, just because of the
Yeah.
disconnect between, yeah,
Then
yeah.
yeah. The Archer, the reason I put it is last is I don't know, it's probably my
I know how
my
you feel.
opinion is taking over, I think, there. But
I know how you feel
no.
about it, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting. It's funny that All Too Well is the ultimate. one,
It's
really.
just, I knew that yours was going to be
And
number
what was
one.
your second? Cold as You. That's
Cold as You, yes,
yeah.
because I always bang on about Cold as You.
And then for me, like I said, my Tears Ricochet is my number two. I just absolutely love that song.
Yeah, of course, our opinions have bled in there. There's probably the Archer fans, between you listeners that are like, "What have you done placing this so low?" So do let us know. Let us know if your ultimate track 5 is the Archer, or all you had to do was stay and defend it in the comments on YouTube. Let us know which is your favorite, or if everyone just loves us all too well.
Okay, so we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for listening. Make sure you rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our video on YouTube if you enjoyed listening. Also, for extra content, make sure you follow us over on Instagram, which is @SwiftlySpokenPodcast.